Hey, what's up? I'm Michael, and I've got a story that. Well, it's something I never imagined I'd ever have to share. It's a story of betrayal, revenge, and a side of love that I didn't even know existed. I guess I could have never seen it coming. It was like any other normal day, until it wasn't. The kind of day that changes everything. And I don't mean in some dramatic, movie-like way. I mean, real life, gritty, messy, and painful. But before I get into it, hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to hear how this all unfolds. I've seen a lot of crazy stuff in my life, but this was on a whole other level. So go ahead, and make sure to turn on notifications too. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. Let's begin now. Let me take you back to when everything was good. We were the kind of couple people looked up to, my wife, Bella, and I. We had that kind of love that people talked about, you know. The fairy tale kind. We met in college. At first, it was all about the little things. Late night talks, lazy Sunday mornings, inside jokes that no one else got. I thought we had it all. But I'll tell you this, sometimes, it's the perfect moments that make the fall even harder. We were both in our late 20s, doing well in our careers. We got married a few years back, and I thought that was it. I was done. I wasn't going anywhere, and neither was she. The kind of couple who'd grow old together. That was the plan, right? A simple, happy life. I was happy. She was happy, so I thought. I remember the day we bought our first house together. We'd saved up for months, scouring the market for that perfect place. It was one of those small, cozy homes on the edge of the city. Nothing too fancy, but it felt like it was ours. I thought to myself, this is it. This is where we'll build our future. We had all these plans, kids, family trips, everything. I thought everything would go according to plan. But that day was the last time I'd feel the way I did about her. The last time I'd think everything was fine. And it's funny, because looking back, I realize I was blind to the signs, the things that were right in front of me. You see, in the beginning, it was just a feeling. A little off, a little different. The usual texts and calls, they weren't coming as frequently. She started staying late at work, more than usual. I figured it was just the pressure of her job. But it felt like she was pulling away. And me? I didn't say anything. I didn't want to seem paranoid. You know, it's easy to brush things off when everything's going well, but that's the trap. You get comfortable, and you stop paying attention to the things that matter. It was around that time that I started noticing the small things. Her phone. The way she'd guard it when it rang. She'd always say it was nothing, just work. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. But I kept my mouth shut, hoping I was just overthinking things. Maybe it was just my insecurity playing tricks on me. Then came the day that changed everything. The day I found the truth. I came home early from work one day. I don't even know why I did it, but something just told me I should. When I walked into the house, the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. Usually, when I came in, she'd be in the kitchen or in the living room, maybe catching up on something. But this time, nothing. Just silence. I called out to her. No answer. So, I went upstairs. I don't know why, but I felt this unease in the pit of my stomach. It was like something was pulling me there. Maybe it was the stillness in the house, or maybe it was something else, something I couldn't shake. When I opened our bedroom door, I found something I wasn't prepared for. And believe me, I've tried to block it out, but it's still there in my mind. Still burns like it happened yesterday. She wasn't alone. The man she was with. I knew him. He was a friend. Someone I'd known for years. We'd hung out, gone out together, laughed at the same stupid jokes. And there he was, standing there in my home, with my wife. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I wanted to say something, to yell, to break something. But I couldn't. All I could do was stand there and watch the two of them. And when she saw me, that's when everything changed. She froze. There was nothing but silence. That was the moment I realized that my life was never going to be the same. And I didn't even know how to process it. She begged me to understand, said it was a mistake, that she was sorry. But in that moment, all I could feel was a mix of disbelief and rage. How could she do this? With him? A guy I trusted? I felt like a fool, like I'd been living in a lie. All those plans, the dreams, everything we'd built together was suddenly shattered. And I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know what kind of man I was supposed to be in that moment. But let me tell you, this isn't where it ends. Not even close. This is just the beginning. Because when you're pushed to the edge, you either fold, or you fight back. And that's exactly what I did. You want to know how? How I turned the tables? You'll have to stick around to hear the rest. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss it. But before I tell you what happened next, let me take you back to that moment. The one where my world came crashing down. I know you're probably wondering, what did you do when you saw them? What happened after that? And honestly, that's where this story gets interesting. Because what I did next isn't what you'd expect. Let me be clear, in that moment, I was lost. I was in shock. I could barely process what I was seeing. I don't know how long I stood there, just staring at them. It felt like time had stopped. My heart was racing, my head was spinning. And the only thing I could think of was, this can't be happening. This isn't real. But it was. I couldn't deny it any longer. She stood there, looking at me like a deer caught in headlights, not knowing what to say. I remember the look on her face. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't fear, at least not at first. It was like she was trapped. Her eyes were wide, like she was surprised I had caught them, like I wasn't supposed to find out. And him? The guy she was with? He was just sitting there. No apology, no shame. Nothing. His face was just cold, almost like he didn't care at all. He wasn't even worried about being caught. It was like he expected it. Like this was part of the plan. And that's when it hit me, this wasn't just a mistake, like she'd later try to call it. No. This was something more calculated. Something deeper. Bella finally found her voice. Her eyes welled up, and she started talking over herself, trying to explain, trying to beg for my forgiveness. She said it was a one-time thing, that it was a mistake, that it meant nothing. She told me she loved me, and that it had been some stupid lapse in judgment. I wanted to believe her. I really did. I wanted to hear the words and think, okay, I can move on. This was just a moment of weakness. But I couldn't. Not after what I'd seen. The more she talked, the more the anger grew inside me. Because I knew the truth. It wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't some random encounter. This was something planned. They'd been seeing each other for a while. I could see it in her eyes, the way she couldn't even look me in the face. The lies, the manipulation, it was all there. So I did the only thing I could think of in that moment. I walked out. I didn't yell. I didn't break anything. I didn't make a scene. I just turned around and walked out of the room. But I wasn't walking away from this. No, I was walking into something much bigger. Something I had no idea I was about to uncover. I left that house and drove aimlessly for hours. I had to clear my head. I needed to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do. My mind was racing. I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know who could understand what I was going through. But I knew one thing, I couldn't let this go. I couldn't just walk away from the life I thought I had, the life we built together. The next day, I came back. Bella tried to talk, but I couldn't even look at her. Every word she said felt like a lie. How could I trust her again? How could I go back to normal when everything I'd known was a facade? She begged me not to do anything rash, not to make any decisions when I was so angry. But I wasn't angry, I was devastated. And when I'm devastated, I don't make rash decisions. I make plans. I was going to find out everything. I was going to figure out exactly what was going on. That's when I started digging. I wasn't just going to take her word for it. She thought she could fool me, but she wasn't the only one with secrets. I wasn't some naive guy who'd been played for years without realizing it. I was going to learn the truth, no matter what it took. I started going through her things. I know that sounds invasive, but at that point, I didn't care. I needed answers. I went through her phone, her messages, her emails. I didn't stop there. I went through her social media accounts too. I know, it's not the most ethical thing, but I wasn't worried about ethics right then. I was looking for the truth. I found a lot. More than I wanted to find. There were messages, dozens of them, from the guy. The guy who had been sleeping with my wife. The guy who had been lying to me all along. They were talking about everything. They had plans, they made excuses for why I was never around. They spoke like they were in a relationship, not like they were having an affair behind my back. The texts were casual, like there was no sense of guilt. In fact, they talked about me in the third person, like I was just some obstacle in their way. That was when I knew I couldn't let this slide. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. This was about taking control of the situation. And that's when I came up with a plan. A way to make sure I got what I deserved. Bella wasn't going to get off easy. No one was going to get away with hurting me like this. I'll tell you what I did next, but first, let me tell you something. I didn't just want revenge. I wasn't some angry man out for some petty payback. This wasn't about me getting even. It was about me taking my power back. It was about showing them that they couldn't treat me like this without facing the consequences. Because I wasn't going to let her, or him, get away with it. No, this was going to be different. But revenge? It takes time. And sometimes, it means thinking a few steps ahead. You see, when you're in a situation like this, it's easy to just blow up and act out of anger. But that's not how you win. That's not how you come out on top. And trust me, I was going to come out on top. I wasn't going to let her, or him, walk away from this without facing the music. That night, as I sat there in the silence of my office, going through all the evidence I'd gathered, I made a decision. It wasn't just about Bella anymore. It was about putting an end to this whole thing. It was about taking back my life, taking back control. I couldn't go through with it the way she expected me to, blindly forgive and forget. No, that wasn't the plan anymore. I spent the next few days running through every detail of the affair, rereading the messages, the calls, the plans they made. It was all laid out right there in front of me. It wasn't just an affair, it was a betrayal on every level. And it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about him too. The man who thought he could just waltz into my life and take what wasn't his. It wasn't just personal, it was an insult. And I wasn't about to let that go. I remember one particular night, when I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. It was a voice I didn't recognize, someone asking if I was Michael. I hesitated for a second before responding. Yeah, who's this? The voice on the other end seemed calm, almost too calm. I've got something you might want to know, he said. And at that moment, I knew that this was no coincidence. This was the beginning of something bigger. I knew right then that this man, whoever he was, had a story to tell. He didn't waste any time. "I've been watching your wife," he said. "I've been keeping tabs on her for a while now. I know who she's been seeing. I know who she's been sneaking around with." At first, I didn't know whether to believe him. But the way he spoke, it wasn't like someone just throwing out accusations. It sounded like he had the facts. He said Bella wasn't just cheating on me, she was involved with someone much closer to home. Someone I had known for years. And that's when everything changed. He told me that it was someone I had trusted. A man I'd worked with in the past, someone I thought was a friend. His name was Tom. He was a guy I had known for over 5 years. We had spent time together, drinks after work, weekend barbecues, all the things that friends do. Hell, I'd even introduced him to Bella a couple of times. We were practically family. I never would have guessed that Tom, of all people, would be the one to do this. And that was when it hit me, this wasn't just about Bella. This was about Tom too. The man who had crossed a line I thought was sacred. He wasn't just an outsider. He was someone I trusted. The betrayal stung deeper than I could have ever imagined. But the guy on the phone wasn't done. He had more. He told me that Bella and Tom had been meeting up in secret for months, even before things had started to feel off with her. They had their own little world, where no one could see what was going on. And the worst part? They didn't even try to hide it. It was like they thought I'd never find out, like I was too dumb to see what was right under my nose. But now, I had everything I needed. I didn't know who this caller was, but he was doing me a favor. He was giving me the pieces of the puzzle that I had been desperately trying to put together. And now, with Tom's name in the picture, I had something to work with. But I still needed more. I started to dig deeper. I had to confirm everything. I wasn't going to just take anyone's word for it. So I reached out to a few people I knew, mutual friends, acquaintances who might know something. I even started talking to people at the office, looking for any signs that could confirm what I was hearing. What I found was more than I bargained for. Tom and Bella's affair had gone on longer than I realized. It wasn't just a fling. It was a full-blown relationship. They had been planning things together, talking about the future, making arrangements. In fact, they had even discussed getting away together, taking trips, starting a life outside of what I thought was our family life. I was just a placeholder in the background, someone who didn't matter anymore. The more I uncovered, the more disgusted I became. How could she do this? How could he? I had trusted them both, and they had turned my life upside down. But you know what? I wasn't just going to sit there and take it. I had already made up my mind. Revenge wasn't just a choice. It was the only way to get my power back. I spent days working on my plan, every detail thought out. I was going to confront Tom, but not in the way you might think. I wasn't just going to yell at him or fight him. No. That would be too easy. I was going to do something that would make him regret ever crossing me. I knew it wasn't enough just to tell Bella the truth. She already knew. No, I had to make sure Tom felt the full weight of what he had done. The man who had destroyed everything I thought I knew, who had betrayed my trust and torn apart my marriage. He needed to feel the consequences. I remember one night, when everything finally clicked. Bella was away on a business trip, and I knew Tom would be alone. It was the perfect opportunity. I gathered all the evidence I had collected over the last few days, text messages, phone records, even some photos of them together. I wasn't going to just confront him. I was going to make him pay, and I was going to make sure everyone knew what he had done. The next morning, I filed the papers. I wasn't just going to let it go. I wasn't going to let him walk away unscathed. I was going to make him regret the day he ever thought he could get away with it. I was going to sue him, and not just for the affair. No, I was going after everything. I was going to make him bankrupt. I was going to take everything he had, strip him of his power, and leave him with nothing. And I wasn't going to stop there. Bella thought I was just going to walk away from this. She thought I'd just take her back, like so many people do in situations like this. But I wasn't like everyone else. I was going to make sure she knew there were consequences for her actions too. She didn't think I had the guts to do what I was about to do. But I did. I could see it in her eyes when I told her. Bella wasn't expecting this. She thought I would be hurt, maybe confused, but ultimately weak. She thought I'd just fall back into the role of the husband who couldn't live without her. She thought I'd give her a second chance, like so many men before me, who let their wives walk all over them. But I wasn't one of those men. Not anymore. I had a purpose now, and that purpose wasn't to fix what was broken. It was to tear everything down and rebuild it from the ground up, starting with them. The day I filed the lawsuit, it felt like a weight lifted off my chest. But that was just the beginning. What I hadn't anticipated was the long, grueling process ahead of me. The court system doesn't work quickly, and the legal world is nothing like the clean, black and white world I had hoped for. It was a slow grind, filled with endless paperwork, strategy meetings with my lawyer, and sleepless nights wondering what the next move would be. But it wasn't just the legal battle I had to contend with. It was the emotional toll it took. Every day, I had to confront the reality of what had happened, of the woman I loved, the life we built together, and the man I once considered a friend, all torn apart by lies. And it wasn't just the betrayal that hurt, it was the realization that they had been playing me for a fool. They didn't think I'd ever find out. And when I did, they thought I'd back down. But I wasn't backing down. Not this time. I remember the first meeting with my lawyer like it was yesterday. We sat in his office, a room full of dusty legal books and framed degrees, and he looked at me like he'd seen this kind of thing before. He didn't offer sympathy or comfort, he just laid out the facts. "This is going to get messy, Michael," he said. "These kinds of cases never go as smoothly as you hope. It's going to take time. It's going to be exhausting." But I was prepared for that. I had no other choice. There was no turning back now. The first thing we had to do was gather the evidence. We went over every text message, every phone record, every email I had from Bella and Tom. It was exhausting work, sifting through pages and pages of information, but each new piece of evidence felt like a small victory. I knew I had a case now, a solid one, and that was all that mattered. But as much as I thought I had everything in place, things didn't go as smoothly as I'd hoped. Bella was no longer the woman I had married. The woman who would have fought for our relationship, who would have tried to make things right. Now, she was a stranger, a woman who was only interested in saving herself. She hired her own lawyer, someone who specialized in defending people like her. The first time I saw him in court, I knew this wasn't going to be easy. He was slick, charming, and he had no problem twisting the facts. His job was simple: make me look like the bad guy, make me seem irrational, make it seem like I was the one destroying the family. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a battle for my life, my dignity, my reputation. I wasn't just fighting to get justice for what had happened. I was fighting for my own soul. Every day I spent in that courtroom, listening to them try to tear me down, it felt like they were taking pieces of me with them. But I wasn't going to let them win. I couldn't. The first major turning point came when Bella took the stand. I had prepared myself for this moment for weeks. I knew she would lie. I knew she would try to paint herself as the victim, as the misunderstood wife who had been caught up in something she couldn't control. But hearing her speak, hearing the words come out of her mouth, made me feel sick to my stomach. She cried, of course. She had rehearsed that part. She talked about how sorry she was, how much she regretted what had happened, and how she was just a broken woman trying to find herself. She told the court that I hadn't been there for her, that I hadn't been attentive, that I had neglected her needs. I could see it in her eyes, she knew exactly what she was doing. She was playing the part of the martyr, the wronged wife who was only guilty of seeking comfort in the arms of another man. It was a performance, nothing more. And the worst part? It almost worked. I could feel the sympathy from some of the people in the room. It was like they could hear the pain in her voice, and for a moment, I wondered if they were starting to believe her. But then, I remembered why I was there. I remembered what this was about. This wasn't about saving our marriage anymore. It was about justice, about making sure she understood the magnitude of what she'd done. That's when I decided to pull the trump card. I called Tom to the stand. At first, the room was silent. People didn't know what to expect. They didn't know what I had up my sleeve. But the moment Tom took the stand, everything changed. The smug look on his face, the arrogance with which he sat down, thinking this was just going to be another day at the office for him. He had no idea what I was about to do to him. I started with simple questions, ones I knew he couldn't answer without incriminating himself. Questions about his relationship with Bella. Questions about their secret meetings, their phone calls. At first, he tried to play it cool, claiming they were just friends, that nothing inappropriate had ever happened. But the more I asked, the more the cracks started to show. The sweat started to bead on his forehead. His answers got more defensive. And then, I dropped the bombshell. I introduced the text messages, the ones that detailed their plans to leave me behind, to start a new life together. I showed the court the phone records, calls made in the dead of night, when they thought I wasn't listening. I watched as Tom's face turned pale, as he realized that there was no way out now. He couldn't deny it. It was all right there in black and white. Bella was in the audience, and when she saw Tom break down, when she saw him squirm under the pressure, I could tell she didn't expect that. She hadn't counted on him turning on her. She thought they were in this together. But in that moment, I realized that I wasn't just taking back control. I was forcing them both to face the consequences of their actions, and for the first time in this entire ordeal, I saw doubt in Bella's eyes. She was no longer the one holding all the cards. She was vulnerable. And that, more than anything else, gave me hope. The courtroom was silent as Tom tried to recover, but the damage had already been done. His lies were exposed. And the look on Bella's face, watching her world crumble, was priceless. It was the first real sign that I was going to win this battle. But I wasn't done yet. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The legal battle was only just beginning, and I had every intention of seeing it through to the end. No matter what it took. I had already made up my mind that I wasn't going to stop until I had seen this through to the end. The legal battles, the emotional turmoil, none of it mattered anymore. I had one goal, to make sure Bella and Tom paid for what they had done to me, to our family. I was done being the guy who sat back, hoping everything would work itself out. Now, I was the guy who would make things happen, one step at a time. The days after that courtroom victory felt like a blur. After the devastating exposure of Tom's involvement in the affair, I knew things were going to get ugly for him. It wasn't just that he had betrayed me, he had taken everything from me. My peace of mind, my dignity, my trust. And worse, he had the audacity to show up at my home, looking for Bella, as if nothing had changed. He didn't even have the decency to avoid me after all that had come out in court. But that's who he was, a man with no shame. The first time I saw Tom after the trial, I was standing in my driveway when he drove up. It was a cold, gray afternoon, one of those days when you can almost feel the tension in the air. I didn't even know what I was expecting, but there he was, rolling up in his sleek, expensive car, like nothing had happened. He got out of the car, adjusted his jacket, and walked toward me with that smug look on his face, the same one I had seen all those times when he thought he was invincible. "Michael," he said, as if we were old friends. Like he hadn't just ripped apart my life. "I'm sorry, man. I think we need to talk." I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, staring at him, trying to hold back the anger rising in me. And the whole time, I could see Bella in the window of the house, watching us. She didn't know what to do, whether to come outside, whether to apologize, or just pretend this was all normal. But she didn't. She stayed inside, and that spoke volumes to me. "Talk," I said, finally breaking the silence. "You're lucky I don't have you arrested for harassment right now. You've already done enough damage." Tom's expression faltered for a second, but he quickly recovered, as if he had rehearsed what he was about to say. "Look, I know things got out of hand," he said, his voice trying to sound reasonable. "But this isn't about us anymore. It's about what's best for Bella." I had to bite my tongue to stop from lashing out. What he was really saying was, it's about what's best for me, and how can I salvage the mess I've made. I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "You have no idea what's best for Bella. And you sure as hell don't know what's best for me. You ruined everything. So don't come here and act like you're some sort of hero, like you're trying to make things right. You're just trying to cover your ass." I could see the shift in his demeanor. His smugness was replaced by a flicker of panic. The truth had hit him. He had no control over this situation. For the first time since I had found out about the affair, Tom looked like a man who had lost his power. But I wasn't finished with him. Not by a long shot. In the weeks that followed, I watched Tom's life start to unravel. And while it may sound cold, part of me couldn't help but feel some satisfaction in watching it happen. Tom had built his whole life around his status, his money, his charm. He thought he could buy his way out of anything, and for the longest time, it seemed like he had. But nothing could save him now. Tom's business was the first casualty of his downfall. He had been in the middle of some shady dealings with some pretty dangerous people I'm sure he had been trying to avoid when things were going well. But with everything in his life falling apart, the walls began to close in on him. The business deals he had been orchestrating in the background started to fall through. Clients pulled out. Investors started distancing themselves. By the time I heard about it, his company was in crisis mode. What really struck me, though, was the way Tom's financial situation crumbled. It wasn't like he was broke, not yet. But I knew it was coming. I knew that sooner or later, he would have to pay for what he'd done. And in the end, he couldn't escape the consequences of his actions. His own greed and arrogance had made him vulnerable to people who wouldn't hesitate to take advantage of him. I had my lawyer look into it, just to be sure. I didn't want to get involved in anything too underhanded, but I wanted to make sure that Tom didn't get off scot-free. And sure enough, his financial troubles had escalated. I wasn't the only one who wanted to make him pay. There were creditors, angry business partners, and disgruntled associates lining up to take their slice of his fortune. One morning, I received a call from my lawyer, telling me that Tom had filed for bankruptcy. It wasn't a surprise, but it still felt like a small victory. His lavish lifestyle was coming to an end. The car, the fancy house, the high-end restaurants, the designer clothes, all of it was slipping through his fingers. It wasn't that I took pleasure in his pain. It was more about seeing the scales balance. After all, I had lost everything, but now he was losing it all, too. And in a way, it felt like justice. But the most satisfying part of Tom's downfall wasn't the financial ruin, it was the emotional toll it took on him. He had always prided himself on being a player, on being the guy who could get whatever he wanted. But when everything started falling apart, he couldn't handle it. He lost his confidence. He started drinking more, showing up to meetings late, or not showing up at all. He became paranoid, afraid that people were out to get him. And that was when I knew, I had won. This was bigger than a lawsuit or a settlement. It was about watching him crash, watching his whole world fall apart. In a way, it was like a mirror image of what had happened to me. I had been broken down to nothing, but now I was rebuilding. He had been on top of the world, and now he was sinking fast. And though it wasn't the kind of revenge I had originally planned, it was the kind of justice that could only come when someone's own actions came back to haunt them. I had taken the high road throughout the whole process, refusing to stoop to their level, refusing to get dragged into petty drama. But the more I watched Tom and Bella struggle, the more I realized that the universe has a way of making things right, even when you don't ask for it. I was moving on. I was rebuilding my life, piece by piece. But for Tom, it was too late. His downfall had begun, and I wasn't about to stop it. He had made his bed, and now he had to lie in it. And for a while, I thought that was enough. Watching his life crumble, watching him lose everything he had worked so hard for, it felt like some kind of cosmic balance. After all, it wasn't just the affair that tore our lives apart. It was the lies, the deceit, the manipulation. Tom hadn't just betrayed me, he had betrayed every principle of trust and respect that I had tried to build our marriage on. But, despite all the justice I thought I was getting, I wasn't prepared for what came next. The moment when Bella came to me, asking for my forgiveness. It happened on a Saturday afternoon. I was at home, trying to put some of the pieces of my life back together. I had started to rebuild, to move forward. I had been spending more time with friends, taking care of myself, rediscovering the things I loved before the whole world went sideways. I felt like I was finally starting to heal. Then the doorbell rang. I didn't recognize the voice when I answered, but I could tell it was her. Bella. She was standing there, nervously shifting her weight from one foot to the other, as if she didn't know how to approach me. I hadn't seen her in months, not since the day everything came crashing down. And yet, there she was, on my doorstep. "Michael," she said, her voice soft, tentative. "Can we talk?" I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at her, trying to read the expression on her face. She looked different. Not in a way that was easy to put into words, but I could see it in her eyes. There was a sadness there, a kind of emptiness, that hadn't been there before. She was no longer the woman I had once known, the woman I had married. She was someone else now, someone who had been through the fire, and I could tell that she had been burned. I didn't invite her in. I wasn't sure I was ready to face her, or even if I ever would be. But she stepped forward anyway, her voice shaking. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I've betrayed you in ways I can never make right. But I'm here because I can't live with myself anymore. I need you to know how sorry I am. Please, Michael." I was frozen for a moment, unsure of how to respond. This wasn't what I had imagined would happen. I had expected her to just disappear, to leave me to pick up the pieces on my own. But here she was, asking for something I never thought she would have the courage to ask for. The emotions I felt in that moment were impossible to describe. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw her out of my life once and for all. But another part of me, one that I didn't even know was still there, felt something else. It was a kind of pity, mixed with anger, mixed with confusion. She had hurt me so deeply. She had shattered everything I thought we had built together. And yet, here she was, broken herself, asking for my forgiveness. She continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for it to get this far, Michael. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I love you. I still love you. And I know that doesn't mean anything right now, but please understand, what happened with Tom, it wasn't about you. It was about me, about my own weaknesses and insecurities. I didn't know how to handle everything that was going on in my life, and I made the worst choice possible. I'm sorry. Please, just give me a chance to prove that I can change. That I can make things right." I couldn't speak. My heart was pounding in my chest, my mind racing with all the thoughts I couldn't seem to sort through. I had never expected Bella to come back like this. I had never expected her to show up on my doorstep, begging for forgiveness after everything she had done. For a moment, I felt a flash of something that almost made me want to forgive her. But I quickly shoved it aside. This wasn't about me, or my feelings for her. This was about what she had done to me, to us. This wasn't something that could just be swept under the rug with a few words of apology. I looked at her, meeting her gaze, and I finally said, I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again. What you did, what both of you did, was unforgivable. She winced at my words, but I could see the pain in her eyes. She wasn't fighting it. She wasn't making excuses. She was just broken. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, she said quietly. I know I've lost your trust. I know I've hurt you in ways I can't even understand. But please, just know that I regret it. I regret everything. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't mean for us to end up like this. There was silence between us for a long time. The air felt thick, heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. I wanted to say something, to get the words out of my mouth, but I couldn't. There was no way to explain how much her betrayal had hurt me, how much it had changed everything. Finally, I spoke. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Bella. I don't know if I can ever forget what you did. But you need to understand something. This isn't just about forgiveness. This is about rebuilding, about healing, and about me finding a way to move on with my life. You can't expect me to just turn the page and forget everything that's happened. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I don't expect that. I just wanted you to know how sorry I am. I've ruined everything, and I know that. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. If you'll give me that chance. I shook my head. I don't know if I can give you that chance. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And with that, she left. No tears, no drama. Just the quiet sound of her footsteps walking away. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel closure. I just felt numb. The weight of everything that had happened, the betrayal, the lies, the pain, was still heavy on me, and Bella's apology hadn't changed that. She had made her choice. And now, I had to make mine. The silence in my house was deafening after Bella left. The weight of her words, the hollow sincerity in her voice, the sadness in her eyes, it all lingered in the air long after she was gone. I don't think I've ever felt that kind of emptiness before. A silence so thick that it seemed to seep into every corner of my life. I spent the rest of the day pacing around, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts that couldn't seem to come together. Part of me wanted to believe her. A small part of me wished that I could let go of the hurt, open my heart, and just say, it's okay, we'll work through this. We can heal. But another part of me, the part that had been burned by her betrayal, felt a cold, hard wall building inside. The kind of wall that only pain and anger can create. I kept thinking about everything she said, everything she promised. I thought about the years we spent together, the life we built, the trust we had once shared. How quickly it all came crashing down. It wasn't just the affair itself that hurt. It was the fact that she had lied to me, manipulated me, and dragged me into a web of deceit. The hurt wasn't just about her breaking our vows, it was about the way she treated me like I was a fool, someone who couldn't see the truth. And now, she was standing there, asking for my forgiveness, asking me to forget everything and give her another chance. But forgiveness didn't come easy. It wasn't something that could just be granted with a few tears and a heartfelt apology. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. This was a betrayal of everything I had ever trusted in her. And no matter how much she regretted it now, no matter how much she had changed, there was still the fact that she made that choice. And that choice had destroyed everything. I spent hours sitting in front of the TV, but I wasn't watching. I couldn't concentrate. I kept replaying that moment at the door, when she stood there with those empty eyes, begging for forgiveness. I had to make a decision. It wasn't going to be easy, but it had to be made. And the truth was, I wasn't sure I could ever go back. The thing about betrayal is, it doesn't just break your heart, it changes you. It forces you to reevaluate everything you thought you knew about yourself, about your life, about what you were capable of enduring. I thought I was stronger than that. I thought I could weather anything. But I had learned the hard way that sometimes, things can hit you in ways you never saw coming. I called my lawyer the next morning. No, I hadn't made up my mind yet, but I needed to know my options. I needed to be sure that whatever I decided, I wasn't going to let her or anyone else take advantage of me. I was done being naive. I was done trusting blindly. And if I was going to move forward, I needed to know how to protect myself. As I sat there, listening to the lawyer explain the legal process of divorce, alimony, and asset division, it was like a weight was slowly lifting off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I didn't feel completely trapped. I had options. I had power. I had control over my future. But still, a part of me held on to the idea of fixing things. I wanted to believe that Bella could change. I wanted to believe that we could rebuild our relationship. Maybe it was just a moment of weakness for her, maybe it was a mistake. But then, I kept coming back to the facts. She had made a choice. She had chosen someone else over me, over everything we had. The next few days were a blur. Bella tried to call me, tried to text me, but I ignored her. She showed up at the house a few more times, standing outside, waiting for me to let her in. But I couldn't. Every time I saw her, all I could think about was how easily she had discarded me, how easily she had thrown away everything we had built. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to feel anger and rage, and part of me did. But another part of me still felt something for her. I wasn't sure what it was, but it was there. A small flicker of the love I had once had for her. And that made it harder. That made the decision even more complicated. One evening, as I was sitting in the kitchen, staring blankly at the wall, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Bella. It simply read, "I'm sorry, Michael. I'm so sorry. I know I've hurt you beyond repair. But I'm still here. If you want to talk, if you ever want to try again, I'll be here. Please, don't give up on me." I stared at the message for what felt like hours. There it was again. The hope. The desperation. But I couldn't respond. I couldn't bring myself to. I had to make my choice. I had to decide whether I was going to stay in this relationship, trying to forgive, trying to rebuild what had been shattered, or whether I was going to walk away and never look back. Finally, I decided to take a walk. I needed space to think, to clear my mind. I walked for hours, just letting the cold night air hit my face. It was during that walk that I realized something. No matter how much Bella begged, no matter how sorry she was, the damage had been done. She had chosen to cheat. She had chosen to betray me. And no amount of apologies was going to change that. As I walked back home, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to forgive her. I wasn't going to give her another chance. It wasn't about revenge, it wasn't about proving a point. It was about self-respect. It was about understanding that I deserved better. And that meant moving on, no matter how painful it was. So, I made my decision. I was done. I wasn't going to be the person who stayed in a broken marriage, hoping that one day things would magically fix themselves. I wasn't going to keep hurting myself by holding on to something that wasn't real anymore. Bella had made her choice. And now, I had made mine. I can't even describe the sense of finality that hit me once I made my decision. It wasn't a feeling of victory, but more of a grim acceptance. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like I'd won. No, what I felt was emptiness, a strange, hollow weight that settled in the pit of my stomach. I knew what I had to do, but that didn't make it easier. The truth was, Bella was a part of my life for so long. Letting go wasn't going to be painless, even if I knew it was the right thing to do. The next few days were agonizing. Bella didn't stop calling. She even showed up at my house, banging on the door, pleading through the window. She was desperate, more desperate than I had ever seen her. Her voice broke through the glass, shouting things like, "Please, Michael, I made a mistake. I'll change. I swear, I'll do anything." She even promised that we could work through everything, that we could go to counseling, that she'd prove to me that she was worth a second chance. But I had heard all these promises before. All of them sounded so empty now, like hollow words floating in the air, too late to matter. The hardest part was hearing her plead, seeing the tears in her eyes. For a split second, I wondered if I was doing the wrong thing. Maybe I could let go of my anger, maybe I could forgive. But as those thoughts crept in, I just thought about the man she had chosen over me. I thought about the lies, the way she had strung me along while she was seeing someone else. How could I ever forget that? How could I ever let that slide? So, I didn't. I didn't answer her calls, didn't open the door when she knocked. And each time she left a message, each time she begged me, I felt a small piece of my heart break. But in the back of my mind, I knew that I couldn't go back. I couldn't be with someone who saw me as nothing more than a fallback. What happened next was almost surreal. Bella's obsession with winning me back escalated. She started showing up at places I frequented, my favorite coffee shop, the gym, even a few times at my work. Every time I turned a corner, there she was. It was as if she was trying to force me into a decision, trying to corner me into giving her a chance. She wasn't just trying to apologize anymore, she was trying to trap me. And it made everything worse. She even went as far as to talk to some of my friends, people who had known us both for years. She'd go to them and ask what she could do to prove she was sorry. What could she do to make things right? And every time, they'd call me up to ask how I was holding up. The whole situation was becoming more complicated than I could have imagined. In the middle of all this, I realized something. Bella wasn't just fighting to save our marriage. She was fighting to salvage her own reputation. The longer she could keep me around, the more she could tell people that she was trying to make things work, that she was a good wife, who had made a mistake, and now she was fixing it. But in the back of my mind, I saw the truth. This wasn't about love or redemption, it was about control. And the more I resisted her, the more she pressed. It was like a war of attrition. But I wasn't going to let her wear me down. I had already made up my mind. Then came the letter. It came a week after I had cut all contact. It was a physical letter, handwritten, no less. I can't even tell you how long it took for me to bring myself to open it. I knew what was inside. I knew it was going to be a desperate plea, another round of "I'm sorry," followed by promises of change and vows to do better. But somehow, I felt like I needed to read it. I needed to know that I wasn't missing something, that I wasn't being too harsh. I opened the letter. And sure enough, it was filled with remorse. Bella wrote about how much she loved me, how much she regretted her actions, how she had realized what she had lost. She wrote about how she would do anything to fix things. And she told me something that hit me harder than anything else: "I never meant to hurt you, Michael. You were my everything, and now I realize that I'm nothing without you." Reading those words stirred something deep inside me, something between anger, sadness, and disappointment. But the more I read, the clearer it became. She wasn't apologizing for what she had done to me. She was apologizing for losing her life, her comfort, her sense of security. She wasn't the woman I thought I married. She was someone who had learned to manipulate, someone who could look me in the eye and lie without blinking. It took everything in me not to tear up the letter right then and there. I didn't want her to have that power over me anymore. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel this deep sense of loss. I had to remind myself, again and again, that this wasn't about me being weak or giving in. This was about protecting myself. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My thoughts were racing, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, begging me to take her back. I heard her voice in my head, replaying those words, "I never meant to hurt you." But I had to remember the truth. The truth was, she had hurt me. She had broken our vows. She had shattered my trust. And no matter how much I wanted to forgive her, no matter how much I wanted to go back to the life we had, I couldn't. I realized, then, that I had no choice but to fully move on. I had to find peace with myself, and that meant walking away. It meant accepting the fact that the woman I once loved was gone, and in her place was someone who could betray me without a second thought. But the fallout didn't stop there. Bella's world was crumbling, and she knew it. Her desperation only grew as the days went by, and I could feel her pushing harder, trying to find new ways to get back into my life. She started showing up at my workplace, leaving gifts at my doorstep, sending me messages with old pictures of us, trying to remind me of the good times. The harder she pushed, the more I realized I had to set boundaries. The more I realized that I had to fight for my own peace. I wasn't just standing my ground against her, I was standing my ground for myself, for my own sanity, my own future. But the fallout didn't just involve Bella. It affected everyone around me, too. Our families, our friends, they all felt the tension. Some of them sided with her, some sided with me, and others just didn't know what to think. And no matter how many times I explained the situation, it seemed like no one fully understood the pain I was going through. All I could do was keep pushing forward. And that's exactly what I did. But let me tell you, nothing prepared me for what came next. Bella had no idea that her actions, her manipulation, her deceit, none of it was going to work anymore. The game had changed, and I was no longer playing by her rules. From that moment, everything shifted. I had taken control of my own life again. I wasn't just some pawn in her game, some emotional backup plan for when things didn't go the way she wanted. I had removed myself from the equation, and with that, I regained a sense of power I hadn't felt in a long time. The days that followed were tough, don't get me wrong. It wasn't like I woke up the next morning, free from the past and able to move on like nothing happened. No, the scars remained, the hurt lingered. But something had clicked. It wasn't just the relief of cutting ties with Bella, it was the realization that I was stronger than I thought. I had survived a betrayal of the worst kind, and I was still here. Looking back, I couldn't help but think about how far I had come. When this whole thing started, I was devastated. I had no idea how deep the betrayal ran, and I was constantly second-guessing myself, wondering if I was just overreacting. But as the truth unfolded, I understood that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the one who had failed. She was the one who chose to lie, to cheat, to throw away everything we had for a moment of excitement. And as much as it hurt, I had to accept that. I had to come to terms with the fact that Bella wasn't the person I thought she was. She wasn't the woman I married, the woman I trusted with my life, my heart. No, the person I thought I knew had disappeared long before I found out about the affair. What I was left with was someone who didn't even seem to understand the magnitude of her actions. It wasn't just her affair that hurt me. It was the lies, the manipulation, the pretending that everything was fine while she was secretly seeing another man. It was the years of trust that she shattered without even thinking twice. But even more than that, it was the betrayal of the future we had planned. The dreams, the moments, the family we were supposed to build. All of that was now gone. She had burned every bridge. And even though she wanted me to believe she could fix it all, deep down, I knew the damage was irreversible. But I also knew something else, that I wasn't the same person I was when all this started. No longer the man who was willing to overlook the red flags, the man who was afraid to stand up for himself, who thought that love meant tolerating everything. I had become someone stronger, someone who understood that love was not a weakness, but a choice that should be respected, not manipulated. The worst part of it all was seeing her try to rewrite the narrative, to turn everything into her sob story. It wasn't enough that she had ruined our marriage. Now, she was playing the victim. She was trying to make everyone believe that I was the one who had pushed her into this, that I was the one who wasn't understanding. But I wasn't going to let her play that game anymore. No more. She had to face the consequences of her own actions. And then came the final twist. A few weeks later, Bella reached out to me one last time. This time, it wasn't a letter or a phone call, it was a message, sent through a mutual acquaintance. This wasn't a plea for reconciliation. This wasn't another, "I'm sorry." No, this time, she was begging me to sign some paperwork, a document that would release her from the financial mess she had gotten herself into with her affair partner. Apparently, he had drained her savings, left her with debts, and she needed me to sign away my rights to any property we had jointly owned in order to get out of it all. It was almost laughable. I didn't know whether to feel anger, pity, or relief. Part of me wanted to say, "No, I'm not going to sign it," and watch her struggle as she had tried to make me struggle. But I didn't have to. By now, Bella was losing everything. Her affair partner had left her high and dry, and even the people she had tried to manipulate were starting to pull away from her. She had burned every bridge, and now, she was standing in the ashes. I thought about that for a long time. How ironic it was that she had been so quick to throw me away, to tear apart everything we had, but now she was scrambling to hold on to what little she had left. It didn't make me feel vindicated, it didn't give me a sense of satisfaction. It just reminded me of one undeniable truth: when you make your bed, you have to lie in it. And Bella was learning that the hard way. For me, though, this was the final chapter. I had given it everything I had. I had tried to save us. I had tried to fix things, to work through it, to forgive. But once I saw who she truly was, once I realized that she wasn't capable of truly loving me, of truly respecting me, I knew it was time to move on. And that's exactly what I did. Moving on wasn't easy. There were days when I still thought about her, when I wondered how she was doing, or if she ever regretted what she had done. But over time, those thoughts faded. I started to rediscover who I was before Bella, before the lies. I started to rebuild my life, piece by piece, even when it felt like there was nothing left to rebuild. In the end, the lesson was clear: betrayal doesn't define you. What defines you is how you handle it. It's the strength you find in the aftermath. It's the ability to look back, face the truth, and walk away when it's no longer serving you. So, here I am today, no longer looking over my shoulder, no longer dwelling in the past. I'm free. And while I will always carry the scars of what happened, I carry them with pride because they're proof that I survived. And that's a victory in itself.